The system of pipes in this house carries a fluid, hot water, that heats the house through a series of radiators. The water is heated in a furnace, but it cannot move far under its own power. A powerful pump is used to move the water around the house. After the water has passed through all radiators, it returns to the furnace to be heated again. The analogy of the house's heating system is very close to the way the circulatory system works in vertebrates. All vertebrates have a series of pipes called vessels that carry a fluid called blood around the body. The vessels have valves to ensure that the fluid always moves in the same direction. The vessels are connected to a powerful pump called the heart. The lungs enrich the blood with oxygen used in energy reactions, just as the furnace provides energy to heat the water in the house. The various organs of the body are equivalent to the radiators of the house's circulatory system. Animal circulatory systems differ from very simple examples, lacking pumps and pipes, up to the complex multi-chambered heart of vertebrates. But circulatory systems all perform a similar range of functions. They deliver oxygen and nutrients to cells. They remove waste products from cells and tissues. In many organisms, blood vessels also equalize temperature and distribute hormones. In this activity, we'll start by looking at the circulatory systems of animals ranging from primitive sponges and flatworms to humans. As we go along, we'll trace the evolution of circulatory systems from their simplest beginnings to the complex circulation of mammals. Next, we'll study the blood vessels that make up the vascular system of animals. We'll see that different types of blood vessels have their own characteristic form, which is directly related to the function they carry out in the body. We'll also look at the structure of blood and see just what the circulatory system moves around the body. In the final section, we'll consider the physiology of the heart and circulatory system in humans. We'll conclude with a discussion of human cardiovascular disease and how heart disease affects normal circulation. Some simple animals don't have real circulatory systems at all. Flatworms and some other invertebrate animals use simple diffusion to move digested food, gases, and waste products from one part of the organism to another. The flat shape and system of branching internal tubes of these organisms enables their cells to receive nutrients and expel waste products over short distances. The fluid filling the space between cells in an animal is called interstitial fluid. This fluid plays a vital role in the transport of chemicals between cells and tissues. Why don't all animals rely on diffusion to transport chemicals around the body? The answer lies in size and distance. The longer the distance, the longer it takes a chemical to diffuse from place to place. Diffusion is fine for tiny animals, or for animals that are very flat. Such animals can absorb nutrients and other substances directly from the surroundings into their cells. For larger organisms, the speed of diffusion is just too slow. Calculations show that the movement of a small molecule across a large cell can take as long as 10 seconds. To diffuse the same molecule a distance of 1 meter, or the height of a child, would take 32 years. The rule of thumb is, if you can see an animal with the naked eye, it won't rely on diffusion, and it'll have a more complex circulatory system. Some invertebrate animals, for example insects and most mollusks, have an open circulatory system to transport food, waste, heat, and other materials. In this type of system, a tube-shaped heart pumps a fluid called hemolymph through arteries into the main body cavity, and from there it directly bathes the various organs. Animals with open circulatory systems do not have an extensive network of blood vessels that infiltrate the organs. A closed circulatory system encloses the blood in a system of tubes called arteries, veins, and capillaries in vertebrates. In invertebrates, they are often referred to simply as vessels. In closed systems, blood is pumped very close to the cells, but the cells are not directly bathed in the blood. Instead, the cells are surrounded by interstitial fluid. Worms, sea urchins, and vertebrates all have closed circulatory systems. In the simplest case, shown by this earthworm, there is one dorsal and two ventral vessels running from the anterior to the posterior of the animal. The dorsal vessel and one of the two ventral vessels are connected by pairs of transverse connecting vessels. As in insects, there is no defined heart. The dorsal vessel serves as the main heart, and the ventral vessels collect blood to be returned to the dorsal vessel. A group of 5 of the connecting vessels at the anterior of the earthworm act as auxiliary hearts, forcing blood into the ventral vessels. The development of gill breathing in fish and lung breathing in land animals needed a more efficient circulatory system. The development of the heart as a muscular organ capable of pumping blood around the body was the next main evolutionary advance. A simple heart consists of 2 chambers. 1, the atrium, receives incoming blood and acts as a reservoir. When the atrium is full, it pumps blood to a second chamber, the ventricle. The simplest vertebrate heart is seen in fish, as this diagram shows. The atrium is a relatively thin-walled chamber in which blood collects before passing to the muscular ventricle. The heart pumps blood out to the gills, where oxygen diffuses into the blood. Blood then passes from the gills to the body tissues. From there, it is collected and returned to the heart. The problem with this system is that the blood pressure drops as it passes through the gill capillaries, and it drops yet again as it passes through capillaries in the body tissues. Fish partly get over this problem by using their body's motion through the water to help the passage of blood through the circulatory system. Amphibians, like this frog, have one ventricle just like in fish, but they have 2 atria. This modification allows blood pumped from the ventricle to the lungs and skin to pick up oxygen, then return to the heart to have its pressure boosted before passing to the body tissues. More pressure equals more oxygenated blood passing to the tissues in a reduced amount of time. In amphibians, the blood returning to the left atrium from the lungs is oxygenated and is ready for the body tissues. But as it passes into the ventricle, it is only partially separated from the deoxygenated blood returning from the tissues. Some of the freshly oxygenated blood, therefore, goes back to the lungs again. This is a design problem that seemed to be waiting for evolution to solve. This circulatory system belongs to a reptile. It is almost the same as the amphibian system, but note the wall, or septum, down the center of the ventricle. The septum helps prevent the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing, thus increasing the efficiency of the circulation. You can also see that the septum does not completely separate the ventricle into 2 chambers, so some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood could still take place. Now look at this circulatory system. The septum is now complete, and there are 2 distinct ventricles. This efficient system is found in birds and mammals. It ensures that the oxygenated blood from the lungs passes to the body organs with no mixing in the ventricles. Now that we've explored the different types of hearts found in the different vertebrate groups, see if you can match the hearts on the screen with the animals that have them. Click Submit to see if you're correct. Sorry, that's not quite right. Sorry, that's not quite right. That's right. The simplest vertebrate heart is seen in fish. There is only one atrium and one ventricle in these animals. Frogs and other amphibians have two atria and a single ventricle. Most reptiles have a septum that partially separates the ventricle into two separate ventricles. Birds and mammals have two distinct ventricles. Now that we've looked at the different kinds of circulatory systems, we'll move on to examine the blood vessels themselves. We've seen that the blood vessels of the body are arteries, veins, and capillaries. Each kind of blood vessel is adapted to carry out its function. The arteries carry blood away from the heart. As you might expect, they are thick-walled and muscular to cope with the high pressure of the blood that is pumped from the ventricles. The major arteries of the body also have layers of elastic tissue around them. Arteries branch into smaller arteries called arterioles. Veins are thin-walled, have few muscle fibers, and unlike arteries, they collapse when empty. Veins also have a series of valves that prevent blood from moving in the wrong direction because blood pressure in veins is low. Capillaries join to small vessels called venules that drain into veins. Capillaries have epithelial walls that are only a single cell layer in thickness. Capillaries need thin walls because that is where all exchanges of gases and nutrients, as well as removal of wastes, occurs between the bloodstream and the surrounding tissues. The network of capillaries that infiltrates a tissue is called a capillary bed. Blood is a fluid tissue with cells suspended in a fluid matrix of plasma. Plasma is made up of about 90% water, in which inorganic salts, important in maintaining the osmotic balance of the blood, are dissolved. Plasma also contains clotting factors that prevent blood from being lost through injury when blood vessels are severed. Substances are also transported in the plasma from one part of the body to another. These substances include hormones, waste products, and nutrients. The cells suspended in blood plasma fall into two groups, red blood cells and white blood cells. The white blood cells play a major role in the immune response of the body against disease and foreign cells. You'll learn about these cells elsewhere in this course. Red blood cells contain the oxygen-carrying protein hemoglobin. The structure of hemoglobin makes it very efficient at transporting oxygen, as you'll find out when we discuss the respiratory system. Now that we've examined the components of animal circulatory systems, we'll move on to look at the anatomy and physiology of the human circulatory system. As we saw earlier in this activity, the mammalian heart is a four-chambered structure. Blood flows from the right ventricle to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. In the lungs, it picks up oxygen and then flows back to the left atrium through the pulmonary vein. The oxygenated blood is pumped to the left ventricle. From there, it is pumped out to the organs of the body via the aorta. After reaching the capillaries, this blood is collected in veins and then flows back into the right atrium through a vein called the anterior vena cava. And the process begins once again. The sequence of events from entry of the blood into the atria to the pumping of the blood out to the body is called the heart cycle. A system of valves inside the heart prevents the blood from moving in the reverse direction. These valves are flaps of connective tissue. There are valves between the atria and the ventricles, and between the ventricles and the major arteries connected to the heart. The blood flow through the lungs is referred to as pulmonary circulation. The blood flow through the body's organs is called systemic circulation. The noises that your physician hears with a stethoscope are, in fact, the sounds of the heart valves closing. The first sound is made by the blood reversing its flow and hitting the closed valves between the atria and the ventricles. The second sound is caused by blood reversing its flow and hitting the valves leading from the ventricles to the major arteries. You may think there is a complex series of nerve impulses from the brain to control the heartbeat, but this is not so. If all nerves to the heart are severed, the heart will still beat, although the nervous system can speed up or slow down the rate at which the heart beats. Recall that heart muscle, or cardiac muscle, consists of a network of interconnected fibers. Part of the right atrium, the pacemaker or SA node, generates electrical impulses that travel across the heart and set the rate at which the cardiac muscle contracts. These impulses don't pass across to the ventricles in a wave. Instead, they move to a second node called the AV node at the junction of the atria and the ventricles. Here the impulses are delayed for about 1/10 of a second, enabling the ventricles to fill with blood. The impulses then shoot down to the apex of the heart via a series of specialized muscle fibers that form a conduction pathway, and the impulses then spread over the ventricles from the apex back toward the ventricles. Let's watch this sequence of contractions again, this time watching an electrocardiograph trace of the impulses. An electrocardiograph is a machine that records electrical currents generated by cardiac muscle impulses. First, the SA node generates the wave of impulses. Next, the atria contract. After this, the impulses are delayed for a short time. Now they move to the heart apex. And finally, they initiate contraction of the ventricles. Now that we've looked at the electrocardiograph trace of the heartbeat, see if you can match up the different phases of the electrocardiograph with the correct part of the heart cycle. Click Submit to see if you are correct. A shows the relaxed heart as blood flows into the atria and ventricles. In B, blood is pumped from the atria into the ventricles. C shows impulses traveling to the apex of the heart. In D, blood is pumped from the ventricles to the major arteries. The circulatory system is of vital importance in the well-being of the body. More than 1/2 of all deaths in the United States are caused by failure of the heart or blood vessels. Most circulatory disease occurs because arteries become clogged by the buildup of plaque, causing a thickening of the artery wall made up of fatty deposits. This process is called atherosclerosis. In some cases, the thickening becomes hardened by the formation of calcium deposits, a process called arteriosclerosis. Various factors add to the risk of plaque formation, including high blood pressure, cholesterol level, activity, smoking, and being overweight. Smoking is a major cause of cardiovascular disease. If you are under 50, smokers are 5 times as likely as non-smokers to die of coronary heart disease. If you stop smoking, you'll also avoid lung diseases like cancer and emphysema. If the clogged circulation affects the coronary arteries, which provide oxygen to the heart muscle, a heart attack may result. If the clogged arteries affect the blood supply to the brain, death of nervous tissue may occur, causing a stroke. The circulatory system shares many of the features of a house heating system, with a pump, pipes, valves, movement of fluid, and an energy source. Circulatory systems vary from primitive diffusion-based systems to the complex double circulation of birds and mammals, in which a 4-chambered heart pumps blood to the lungs and body organs in a sequence that allows pressure to be maintained in blood passing both to the lungs and to the organs. The movement of blood through the body occurs through arteries, capillaries, and veins. Form and function are closely linked in the structure of these different types of blood vessels. Blood consists of a fluid called plasma that contains cells important in carrying oxygen and in fighting disease and foreign matter in the body. Plasma itself carries nutrients and hormones around the body. The human heartbeat is controlled by electrical impulses starting at the SA node in the right atrium. A series of valves within the heart prevent the blood from moving in the wrong direction when contractions take place. Cardiovascular disease is the major cause of death in most developed nations. Heart attacks and strokes are both produced by a buildup of tissue inside arteries, which interferes with blood flow to the heart itself, producing a heart attack, or to the brain, resulting in a stroke. Although cardiovascular disease is a cause of dying of old age, millions of people die needlessly each year because they fail to reduce their risk factors. It isn't difficult to reduce your risk of dying from heart disease. Check your blood pressure and cholesterol level regularly. Maintain an active lifestyle, watch your weight, and don't smoke.